get to introductions and introduce yourself and tell us what you do, and also why you are here for this panel, how this affects you and what you have for it.
Yes, so hello everyone. My name is Whitney Bishop. I'm a community prevention advisor with Lost and Found. We're a mental health resource and support organization aimed to reducing suicide risk in our community, mainly on college campuses, but also in community spaces as well. Prior to this, in a previous life, I was a Title IX coordinator at Western Dakota Technical College, and then also worked as a Title IX liaison for the University Center campus here. So I have seen a lot on the college campuses and trying to do more to normalize these conversations and making it okay to report to the powers that be and how scary that can be. So trying to normalize that and make it less isolating for our community.
All right, love that.
Good evening, my name is, sorry, I didn't mean to cut off your applause. My name is Brandy Christensen. I'm an HR professional. I'm currently with Monument Health, but I have over 20 years of practicing HR, and a big part of my roles in almost all throughout my career is to be the person that people come to report sexual harassment in the workplace, investigate it, work with them to also, make it safe and as comfortable as it can be. It's a very uncomfortable situation, but that's my role, and that's why I'm here tonight. So thanks for having me.
Hi, my name is Jess Rogers. I'm an employment attorney. I work for Black Energy right now. I've worked both in-house and at a law firm practicing employment law. So I've dealt with a lot of sexual harassment claims in the workplace, and as in-house counsel, the good thing about that as opposed to working for a law firm, when you work for a law firm, they call their attorney when it's already happened. But when you're in-house, you get a chance to try to reform from within. So I think that's really important. This is just an issue that's important to me. So I've been doing this, 15 years-ish.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Barron-Hui. I'm also an attorney. I have been practicing for 17 years, and a majority of my practice is employment related. So I've been handling employment discrimination cases ever since I started. I work at Banks McCullen Law Firm here in Rapid City, and I do both plaintiffs' work and work representing employers in discrimination and other claims. So, well, I can talk more about that later. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So let's just kick it off with how frequent do you get reports like this? Is this just nonstop? I remember when I was in college, my roommate came to me and she was upset. She was viscerally traumatized. She had tears in her eyes that her coworker had cornered her in the freezer and practically assaulted her before she could get out, and she didn't know what to do. And I was like, you mean you don't know what to do? Go tell your boss. They're not gonna allow that in the workplace. And she eventually did report, and they walked him out, and she kept her job, but she was terrified and had no idea how to report. So is this super common? Is this something we're dealing with all the time still? I can read your faces, but use your microphone, ladies, help me out.
Sorry, I was just thinking it gets reported not nearly as often as it happens.
Yeah.
I'm sure, Brandy's nodding along. I think that's part of the problem, is that people don't feel that comfortable. I will say in my own personal experience, I used to practice law in Virginia. Virginia has a different civil rights history than we have locally, and people there are much more aware of their rights, and I saw a lot more reporting there.
Yep.
Because people are just aware. Our culture here in South Dakota, we're kind of, bootstraps people. We fix our problems ourselves. We don't need your help. We don't report. And it's hard to break through that. It's hard to culturally convince people this is what you have to do to make it better.
Absolutely, and I know I heard some people talking about misogyny earlier in our Midwest ways, and I always call it rape culture, because when we don't report, when we don't act on this, when we act like it's no big deal, we're just allowing it to continue. So until we start talking about it, we just are enabling it.
I want to add to what you just said. I think a big component of that is creating these emotionally safe spaces in the workplace. Just having a toxic environment at work, and these things then do happen. No one's going to feel comfortable coming forward as an an environment, you don't feel safe to do so. So I think that's a lot of, as HR professionals, I give y'all lots of kudos, but having those safe spaces, because a lot of workplaces you don't. So if that is happening and you don't have that outlet that feels safe, it's gonna be even more underreported.
And then one thing to remember too is that this wasn't always the case where we were protected. Like, there was a time when we reported and we got fired, am I right? So there's a little history there where it's still really hard to trust that you're not gonna get fired or you're not gonna be reprimanded for reporting the problem. I mean, the Me Too wasn't that long ago.
No, Me Too was very recent, and it helped tremendously in bringing awareness to rights and reducing a lot of the stigma associated with being a victim of discrimination in the workplace. But you're right, retaliation is a really big deal, and it's a really big fear for a lot of people. So as has been mentioned by the others on here, having that culture in the office or in the employment setting is just so important, because if it doesn't come from the top down, lower level employees aren't gonna believe that they're gonna be protected when they report. The law does protect them tremendously when they report, but they're not gonna fully believe that when there is so much distrust there.
Even in South Dakota, right to work state?
So right to work actually has nothing to do with any of this.
Love that.
Right to work has to do with unionizing or not unionizing. But South Dakota is an employment at will state. And what that means is you can be fired at any time for any reason, and you can also quit at any time for any reason. There are exceptions to that, some that we don't see very often, but one of the big ones is if you are fired in violation of state or federal law, anti-discrimination laws most notably, but there are others. So you can't be fired for a discriminatory reason. And I think it's also important to know that harassment is just one form of discrimination that can take place in the workplace. Sexual harassment specifically is its own very special component of discrimination, but there are other forms of discrimination. We see it in unequal pay. We see it in receiving unfavorable job assignments. We see it in lots of different things. Failure to hire, failure to promote, that sort of thing. So harassment is just one type of discrimination that you can experience. And if you feel like you have been discriminated against in the workplace, it is absolutely imperative that you complain about it. If you don't complain about it and bring it to the attention of your superiors, you might not be protected later if you go to file a lawsuit. So it's critical that the employer have knowledge of it, not only to preserve your ability to file a lawsuit, but to give them a chance to correct what's happening. Because chances are they want to correct what's happening. I do a fair amount of work for employers, and it's wonderful because, as my colleague here said, you can actually create change, helping these employers develop policies and learn how to identify what does discrimination look like? Is this discriminatory? Is this not? And so that's why I love a lot of my employer work, is I can help them to create that culture that we've been talking about here that's so important.
I think to your point about, people think they'll get fired. You won't get fired in this day and age. Employers are that smart. Everyone knows that. You may not get promoted the next time you apply because you're a troublemaker. Like, retaliation has shifted, right? No one's dumb enough to fire you for making a complaint, but they will do other things. I've seen that, and that's honestly why you have to report. Because a lot of employers, what I see happen is that your immediate manager will retaliate against you. And if you don't raise the issue, your actual employers that care about these things won't know that's happening.
Right.
And so you will, experience these adverse events, and so you have to bring it forward. Because you might have a manager who's a terrible person, and you might have upper leadership that would be horrified if they knew.
Right.
Because people are getting, it gets more subtle. You talked in the last panel about sort of progress over time. So I think we've made the progress where even the smallest employers who don't have an attorney, can't afford to have one on retainer, they know you can't fire someone, but these other little things happen. So I think it's just gotten a little more subtle than firing you.
That's a good point, Jess. That was what I was sitting here thinking. Just don't, if it is happening, if you know somebody it's happening to, don't stop at your immediate supervisor. I worked for an organization, not my current one, it's not Monument Health, but previously, where when it was discovered that a pretty significant case was happening, Multiple people that I interviewed during the investigation said, oh, that's how they are. Been that way for years. What? And so it almost becomes this acceptable thing. I call it escalation of bad behavior. It didn't start out as severe as it was when we finally knew about it and could investigate it and do something about it. It started out very small. And as it grew and nothing happened, this individual just got worse and worse and worse, and it was just acceptable. That's just how they are. So my advice would be, don't stop with your immediate supervisor. If they're not taking it seriously, they don't want to do anything about it, you go to the next level. If you have an HR department, that's what HR is there for. They're an advocate for everybody in the organization. Sometimes people think that they're just there to support management. That's not true. HR is there for every single individual that works for the organization. And again, if you don't have HR, just keep talking until somebody stops and listens, because Jess is exactly right. Employer liability in this is huge. And while there might be subtle retaliation that happens, yeah, they're not gonna walk you out the door. So.
On that note, I think for particularly the next generation going into the workforce, making sure, as sad as this is, that they're reading those policies so that way they do know who to report to and how to do that in the right way. Because there are a lot of workplaces that you may report to somebody like your supervisor. Are they supposed to carry that forward? Yes. Is that reality? No. So making sure that they know what those policies are, but then also advocating for each other, right? Like, we are each other's best advocates. So equipping everybody with the knowledge of who are those go-to people, so that way when we are hearing about it, not if, when, we can help funnel those people and tell them how to report, encourage them to do so, because it does have that long-lasting impact for sure.
Thank you.
Maybe some of the professionals could talk about, if you have a situation like this going on, about how to document your journey there.
I love it when everybody else is the better moderator, but yes, let's do that. I told you I'm winging it tonight, guys. So yes, what are the steps? What are the best ways to document what you have going on?
If you feel you've been discriminated against, I always recommend that people essentially keep a diary with as specific details as possible, dates, times, locations of all events that have transpired, any witnesses, and then anyone to whom you have reported the incident. All of that is critical later on when it gets to either a charge of discrimination or a lawsuit. But also don't hesitate to reach out to an attorney sooner rather than later, because they can help you take more practical steps with this particular employer that you're dealing with.
Yeah, I would say also, when you are reporting, when you're making these complaints, do it in email and then send it to your personal email, or CC your personal email, so you'll always have a record for it just in case worst case scenario happens. The other thing that a lot of people maybe don't know or don't feel comfortable with is if you get to the point where you've run it up the flagpole within your organization, and maybe you're at a bad organization. Most employers care about this, but there's obviously still, a few out there. If they don't do anything, you have to use their process first legally. You can't go straight to a lawsuit or the EEOC. But if you go through your employer's process and they don't believe you, or they say, well, we couldn't really find this, and you don't agree, you can file a complaint yourself. EEOC has a website. It's very simple. You basically fill in your contact information and you just write a paragraph. Nobody cares about your grammar, nobody cares. Just get the facts down and they will call you and they will have a meeting with you to get more facts out, and they will ask you specific questions. So you do not have to know what you're doing to make a report to the EEOC if your employer doesn't respond to you. They are there for employees and they will kind of spoon feed you, let you know the information they need. So don't ever be afraid to do that if you can't afford an attorney.
And for those of you that may not know, that's Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So yeah, no, it's just a common nature for us to use our acronym, so.
Yeah. I was just gonna add one thing. It just popped into my head, but I think we're better sometimes at speaking, right? Telling our story of what happened. AI is a great tool, so you can speak and it'll type it all out for you in transcript form. But I just had to, a lot of students that have reported, which is a totally different thing, they ask, can I just tell you and you write this down for me because I want to verbalize this? And so I think empowering them do that in whatever best form is for them.
I always say CYA all day long, CYA. For everybody I supervise, CYA, and I'm like, if you get a complaint, even a simple complaint, it could be outlandish, I don't care, tell me about it. Because now you've documented it with me, I then get a call, something happens, I'm already aware of what's going on from your point of view. I'm gonna be able to handle that situation so much better. I recently had a situation, but the whole way through, I had documented it with my direct manager and I had documented it with my director. When the situation came to a head, they already had my back. They already knew what was going on. So even though there was nothing to act on until it did come to a head, they were still there the entire way, and it was just so important that you just document it with your direct supervisor. Even if you think it's silly, even if you don't think it'll actually come back to haunt you, if something gave you a bad impression, something gave you a bad feeling, CYA document. I'm a big fan of follow-up emails to summarize what we were talking about, just so you know what we were talking about, just to further that discussion, or here's what I was talking about there, just document that. Once you have it on that server, you got it, and then you can have that actual timestamp, dated proof. Thank you. All right, well, that was our wrap-up session. I'm getting here. We are